Graham's got a long-established career in engineering, and I normally say railway engineering, but Graham's actually quite unique in lots of ways. But Graham's got quite a varied engineering background. Started off with Babcock, then with John Brown Engineering. He had his first taste of the railway working from Bombardier. From Bombardier, he then went on to Hunslet-Barclay, and he ran Hunslet-Barclay in the Kilmarnock. It was the first time I met Graham. I was running Springburn Depot at the time, and Graham was running Hunslet-Barclay. So we used to battle there way back in the past. Graham then went off rails for a number of years and went into oil and gas and coatings and all sorts. So he did go off the rails literally, but we're really pleased that Graham has come back onto the rails literally, and is now the Chief Operating Officer for CAF for the rolling stock side. So it's actually really good to have Graham on because he's just got that wider experience, and he's not an old railway hand. So that's really good. So really looking forward to your presentation. You've got a big audience here. You've got an audience who are your customers as well, and have been through the pain. So apart from that, over to yourself, Graham. Thank you again.
Hey, good evening all. I will share my screen. If David, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
We'll get the technology sorted.
Yep, no, that's fine. Yeah,
It's
go on to that. How does that look now?
yeah.
Yeah, good, fine.
Graham, seem to have the stuff in the presentation with what's coming next. I don't know if you want to put it into the
I don't want
bigger
that.
version if that's possible.
How's that?
Turn off present mode, Graham.
I want to be in present mode. I can do it without that. But,
Graham, normally on the display settings, there's a switch screens. You probably want that one.
how's that? No?
No.
This is a display setting. Swap presenter view and slideshow. How's that?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Hang on.
Good. All right. I need to see you guys though. I don't like.
Excellent.
I don't like not seeing the audience. All right. Okay. We're good to go. So, with that slight hiccup at the beginning, good evening all. My name's Graham Taylor. I am here to talk to you about the CAF Mark V coaches, Caledonian Sleeper and TransPennine. We start off with a very glamorous picture taken in the middle of the night in a December evening in Glasgow Central Platform 1. I wasn't there. I was at a dinner in Edinburgh at the time, actually. So I was having a nice glamorous time as well on the Royal Yacht Britannia. And other people were doing a great job. So I take no credit for that other than to show it here. I will take credit for this picture, which was taken in a slightly less glamorous location of the Velin test track in the Czech Republic. Anyway, so a little bit about me. Now, Ian's actually spoken most of this already. So as I say, I'm not a career railwayman. I didn't join the BR training scheme back in the 1980s, and I haven't spent all my career in rail. But I have had two sessions of time in the railway. I find myself back here, and I find it a fascinating place to work, which is probably why I came back. So as Ian said, I started off working for Babcock in the power industry, building coal-fired power stations. Now, that's all bad news. Then I went, spent a bit of time in oil and gas. That's bad news. Mining, we're not allowed to dig stuff out of the ground, so that's bad news. So I found myself in the only kind of environmentally friendly thing that's available, which is rail. I have spent most of my time working on diesel trains. So that's bad news as well. But anyway, we'll put all that behind me. As I say, I started in Bombardier back in the mid-90s, 1996. I worked as project director on the Class 170 Turbostars. Where one of my big customers was actually ScotRail. And I think it's one of the signs of getting old is when a fleet which you've introduced is actually scrapped. I haven't quite got there yet, but I dare say it may happen. I then spent time working in Bombardier and the regional director working in South Europe. And then, as Ian said, I found myself back in Scotland as MD of Hunslet Barclay. I was lucky enough to go back there a couple of months ago. I meet Jerry and the guys who've taken it on, and I'm very confident that the team at Brodie's will be able to do a fantastic job in taking that particular facility forward into its next lease of life. I came back into rail 3.5 years ago now, working with CAF to develop the Newport factory, which you'll see a little bit more of later. And then for the last couple of years, I've been the project director working on the introduction of Caledonian Sleeper and the TransPennine coaches. That pretty much brings me up to date. On the Mark V fleet, we've got one more train to sell, so we're nearly there. In terms of the IMechE, I actually sit on the qualifications and membership board, which anybody who is a member of the IMechE will have been through that august body. You probably don't realise it, but there's a huge amount of effort happens after your interview. The bit that you worry about, you fill your form in and you interview. There's a huge amount happens after that process to make sure that we don't have any issues associated with that process. I'm very pleased to say that I am a committee member of the Scottish branch of the Railway Division and have been for 5 minutes now. So thank you very much. And for probably a little bit longer than that, but less than 5 days, I was elected on Monday as a member of the Railway Division Board, which I'm really looking forward to. Even in just the last couple of days, some of the papers have started to come across through my email, and I can see that's going to be a fascinating job. I'm really looking forward to getting into it. And as well as that, I actually am the IMechE nominee on the Engineering Council and sit on the Quality Assurance Committee. So people who are, people may not realise, but actually the IMechE or any other PEI give you your licence to operate. So they're your CN or your INs or your NTEC. So they actually do that under licence from the Engineering Council. So the Engineering Council are the people who give you that, but they effectively subcontract that and let the organisations do it themselves. But there's a quality assurance process which has to look after that, and they employ people like me, or not employ, they ask people like me to sit on those committees, and actually we get to check on other PEIs. It would be a bit like the poach your tongue gamekeeper or hens getting looked after by the flock. So we're not allowed to look after our own institutions. So I have 2 institutions which I look after in terms of the quality assurance of the way that they hand out their licenses. So it's a little bit of background stuff, but a very, very important part of making sure that engineering actually retains its quality level. Some people have seen this picture before. Malcolm Drabell mentioned this last time, but I think every railwoman, and I don't really think I'm a proper railwoman, in fact, I'm not a proper railwoman. Every railwoman wants to have a locomotive named after them. And I have to say that happened to me. So when I finished in Newport, what I was really pleased about is this fantastic piece of engineering, the locomotive which we have in Newport, the move coach was named after me. I was really, really chuffed with that. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't coerce anybody, but I was really pleased that they named after me. And for those of you who are interested in locomotives, this is a Zephyr 2100 ES. It has a 26 kilonewton drawbar capability. Not sure exactly what that is. It will push or pull 520 tons of train. And to put things into perspective, 26 kilonewtons, I don't know if that's a lot or not. An HST continuously only puts out 46 kilonewtons. So it's kind of like half of an HST. Doesn't go as fast as an HST. The bad news is that's the only loco I'm going to talk about tonight. So this is a coach's presentation. So there's not going to be any chat about locos. So if anybody was expecting me to talk about class 92s and 73s and 68s, you may be a little disappointed. You can leave now if you wish. So what am I going to talk about? So I think with lockdown, the ability of people to move around the country has obviously been quite difficult. I've been fortunate. I've been able to go to work. I think many of us here have, but a lot of people have been cooped up at home. So what I decided to do was to put together a little bit of drone footage. So Adric, who's with us tonight, gave me a whole stick full of footage. I said, there you go, Graham, that's great, Ian, you can make it. It took me 4 hours to make a 4-minute video, but thank you for that. We'll talk about the CAF contracts in the UK, a little bit about the platform which the Mark V's come from, in more detail about the sleeper and the PPE coaches, and then some reflections on what I've learned over the last couple of years. I'm hopefully going to dispel some myths, because I think there are a number of myths in the industry. And then we'll finish off with a little bit of a tall tale. Maybe it's not a tall tale, but I think it's something just to think about. So with no further ado, this is a photograph taken at night by a drone. This is all drone footage. I'm going to shut up for 4 minutes and let you watch the video. Okay, apologies for the amateur filmmaking there, but and for those followers of male voice choirs, that was the Front Male Voice Choir, which is about 50 miles from Newport, singing about a place called Harlech, which is actually about 100 miles from Newport. Hopefully you forgive me those minor indiscretions. So talking about the the current contracts which CAF have in the UK. So Cal Sleeper was first, which we're going to talk about a little bit more in the future. TPE Mark V coaches came along after that. Two EMU and DMU fleets for Northern. The 125 mile an hour Class 397 EMU for TPE. Birmingham Tram, so I think topical at the moment because this is follows on from an existing tram contract which CAF have in Birmingham, but this has battery hybrid capability, so when it's going without the wires, it can still keep going. It's something that CAF has done in a number of different jurisdictions around the world, and it's now available in Birmingham. Could be refitted in Edinburgh as well. West Midlands DMU, that contract is just in commissioning at the moment. Northern Ireland Railways, if you've been on a train in Northern Ireland, you've been on a CAF train, as they have the whole fleet there. We picked up a contract recently to extend the size of some of those trains, so that's an intermediate car which was delivered quite recently. Docklands Light Railway, so CAF are in the process of building a new fleet for DLR, and there's 42 trains in that. Significant amount of testing required to done that, obviously it's a driverless train, although there's a train captain on board, effectively it was a driverless train. And then what you saw in the factory there was a significant number of DMUs for Wales and Borders. So the normal practice with CAF has been to do the prototype for the early phase in Spain, and then carry out the rest of the builds in more local facilities. Wales and Borders was the first one, which was all done in Wales. So everything on that fleet has been done in the factory in Newport, and certainly the first train, the first two trains are now in commissioning. So a significant amount of activity in the UK market across a whole range of different types of vehicles, from trams, light rail, EMU, DMU, intercity, regional, all sorts of different things, a whole range of different types of products which are either have been supplied or are in the process of being supplied, so all very recent. And the heavy rail all come from the CVT platform, so it's something that CAF decided that we're going to work on the UK market. CVT platform is something which they use in Europe, but obviously lots of reasons why the UK is very different from Europe, particularly around structure gauge. So a particular platform was developed for the UK. This in itself, this is worthy of a whole presentation itself. I'm only going to touch on it here, but just covering the highlights. There's a new EMU capability. We saw in some of the slides there, the Class 331 for Northern, which is very much a commuter EMU. And then the Class 397 for TPE, very much a regional, even an intercity style arrangement, and a whole range of different types of capabilities in terms of that. DMU, again, we've had 3 orders for DMUs, but I think surprised a lot of people that DMU orders are still being placed. 195s for Northern, which is a sort of commuter train. The 196 is for West Midlands, slightly longer distance. And the 197, which actually breaks into 2 sub-fleets. One with first class and ETRMS to go in the Cambrian line. Again, classical DMU engine on each coach, so that can be flexed around loads of different sizes. And coaches, which we're going to talk about in a moment. And then within that platform was the ability to have a hybrid bi-mode capability, or even an independently powered EMU with battery power. So all of those options were included in the platform. The battery power has been bid to owners, but we haven't got any purchases of that. The same with bi-mode, those have been bid, but nobody's actually bought those at the moment. So in terms of the main characteristics, body shells are either 23 or 20 meters long. We'll come back to that. Extruded aluminium profiles, and then on the power, electric power, 25 kV or 750 kV. Relatively standard in that particular arrangement. Again, door arrangement, either twin leaf 2/3, 1/3, or single leaf end doors. So good flexibility in terms of creating either commuter capability or longer distance regional and intercity. Bogies are inboard bearing, which seems to be in vogue at the moment. The EMU and the DMU have axle mounted gearbox for motors. The trailer bogie for the EMUs and DMUs follows the same arrangement in terms of braking. So the brakes are cheek mounted on the wheels, For the coach bogies, we have axle mounted discs, so slightly different arrangement for the coach bogies. If anybody wants to know why, I don't know. I'm going to have to ask somebody else. But that is a lightweight bogie design, enabling the whole vehicle weight to be kept as low as practical. So, Cal Sleeper. So back to our very glamorous photo, which, as I say, I have nothing to do with. I did meet the lady in the photo though, and she's actually a singer as well as an actress and a model. So there are 75 vehicles in the Caledonian Sleeper fleet, four vehicle types. So the accessible coach, of which there are 14, probably is the only coach in the UK which has 2 PRM toilets. So at either end of the coach here we have a PRM toilet. This vehicle also houses the double beds, so the sort of much publicised double beds on Cal Sleeper are both in this particular vehicle. And the double beds come with a shower and toilet arrangement. There is also a PRM double bed, and that's adjacent to the PRM toilet. One of the compromises that had to be made was we couldn't make a PRM compliant toilet and make that part of the bedroom as well. In that coach as well, there are also 2 classic bathrooms as well. So that is everybody's in there. It's a very cosmopolitan coach, if that's what I want to describe it. So the seated coach, I don't believe Cal Sleeper sell this as a first class coach, but every other operator in the country would. So it's 1/3, 2/3 layout. The seat pitch is very generous, and the seats are actually what we use on TransPennine as the first class seats. So this is very much a first class offering. So the seat is quite significantly up from a normal standard class arrangement. In this coach as well, we have a PRM toilet which services that area. There's also significant bike racks. I think it's either 6 or 8 bikes can be mounted here, along with a significant amount of luggage. Obviously, one of the expected things is this is going to have a lot of people who are traveling big distances, so a lot of luggage. And on the left-hand side of the picture there, we've got the guard or the train manager's office where the TCMS for the vehicle is actually housed. So all the setting up of the train can be done in that area there. In terms of seated coaches, there's 11 of them. Sleeper coaches, which obviously represents the bulk of the fleet. There's 40 of them in the fleet. 10 rooms in each of these, along with a service area which allows you to keep food which has been prepared in the galley at a high temperature. There's also refrigerated carts in there as well. So that allows the train guys to provide breakfast to the people in that. So we've got 6 rooms which are en suite. You see a picture there of the en suite toilet in toilet mode, and that seat flips down, and then you have a shower which you can have. It's a fully en suite shower and toilet arrangement. And there are 4 rooms on that which are just a standard classic arrangement. There's a question I'm going to ask everybody. Which has more toilets, ScotRail or Cal Sleeper? I'll come back to answer that. ScotRail or Cal Sleeper? Which do you think has got more toilets? And then the club coach, which a lot of people have seen the mock-ups and the layouts, and this has seen a significant amount of pictures in the press. This is the leisure area of the coach, but it's been designed to carry out a number of different functions. At the left-hand end of the picture there, you can see there's a PRM area where people who are in wheelchairs can be part of that. It also has access to the PRM toilet, which is mounted next. So the seated coach and the club coach always go together. And then you've got the bottom side there, what we'll call the leisure area of that, where we've got a number of seats and tables, which I'm not sure how it's going to work in the socially distant area. We managed to squeeze, I think, 8 people around one of those tables. We wouldn't be able to do that today. And then on the upside of that is a number of stools which will rotate through 90 degrees and allow you to travel whichever direction. You want to travel back with a travel forward, you've got an ability to do that. And so the saw table allows people to work together or to work independently. There's the laptop plugs and sockets on that side of the coach. On the other side, there's nothing in it. It's a deliberate policy. So very different type of arrangements. and allow people to do different things within that same area. There's a significant galley to enable top quality food to be produced. And then there's also a small crew area to allow 4 people. And again, the train manager's office is duplicated. So as long as you've got a club coach or a sleeper coach as part of the rate, you can run the train. But it needs to have one of those because the brains of the train are located within those two particular areas. And there's 10 club coaches in that. So these are put together into an A rake and a B rake. Each rake has got a seated, a club, and accessible in it. Gareth will tell me if I'm wrong. The A rake has got 5 sleepers. The B rake has got 4 sleepers and another accessible. So you'll find a reason for that in a minute. But the A rake and the B rake are slightly different. So one myth that I want to blow out tonight. A lot of commentators, a lot of old railwomen, I think you might follow me, say, why can't we have the seats lined up with the window? And you hear this going on and on and on. Why can't we have the seats lining up the windows? The answer is you can. There's absolutely no reason not to do it. And what I've taken here is a blow-up of the club coach. And I'm colourblind. I think it's purple, maybe blue, but you can see the deadlights in this particular blow-up here. And you can see that quite clearly the deadlights are in line with the seat backs on the bottom side of that. So the windows are all the same size, but the windows have been positioned such that they can be directly adjacent to the seated area. And if you look through the train, you'll see that those deadlights are not in line with each other. And I think this is probably one of the very few vehicles around where the deadlights are not the same on both sides. So if you hear a manufacturer saying what can't be done, it can. And just to prove it's not just this, if we look again at the accessible coach, you can see very different layer of deadlights on either side of that coach. Same size window on one side, and then the sleepers have got a window adjacent to the sink on the other. Again, for the seated coach, different size, same windows, but there's large areas of the vehicle with no windows at all. So again, that's different. And the sleeper coach itself has same size windows on one side or the other side. The layout of them is very different. So a lot of flexibility in that basic concept design. So no reason why you can't have seats and windows lined up if that is your wish. So I'm going a little bit off piece there. There are lots of people on this call that know much more about Caledonian Sleeper operation than I do, but I'll try and explain it. If I get it wrong, I'm sure that people will correct me in the Q&A. So first up, Cal Sleeper is not the only sleeper service in the UK. Great Western run a service to Penzance. It's not as long, not as glamorous, it's not as fantastic, but it is another sleeper service. So the Cal Sleeper service runs 2 trains from London each day, one known as the Highlander, the Lowlander, and the other one known as the Highlander. So the Lowlander goes to Glasgow and Edinburgh. It's 16 cars leave London. It splits at Carstairs, and half goes to Glasgow and half goes to Edinburgh. The Highlander services, again, 16 cars leave London. They actually go to Edinburgh, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. 8 cars go to Inverness, 5 cars go to Aberdeen, 5 cars go to Port Williams, and then at the same time that is happening in terms of northbound, the southbound is happening as well. So an exceptionally complex service. And although there aren't a significant number of trains, and I think some people say it's only a handful of trains, the service is very complex. It's geographically, the most complex, and it probably only cross-country cover anywhere near the same sort of diversity of routes. So we go from West Coast Main Line to the jointed track on the way up to Port Williams. A huge different range of things that the product has to deal with. So I mentioned earlier about what happens in terms of operation. So this is actually the working timetable. So I sort of pull this off real-time trains. I know it changes slightly, but basically this is the whole of the Caledonian Sleeper timetable. I've broken it into sort of 10-minute slots, but the Highlander goes from Port William, Aberdeen, and Inverness and south. At the same time as it's going south, it's equivalent to travelling north. And the same happens on the Lowlander. So I want to concentrate and go into a little bit more detail and talk about what happens on the Highlander. So this is the situation that happens in Edinburgh. And this happens every night apart from Saturday. So a train comes down from Inverness. It's got 6 sleepers and 2 day coaches in it. It arrives in Edinburgh. There's another train arrives a few minutes later from Aberdeen. It's got 3 sleepers and 2 day coaches in. That has to be configured into the rake. Then a little bit later, just after 1 o'clock, 5 coaches arrive from Fort William. So 4 locomotives have brought these coaches down, and they all have to be configured into this A and B that we talked about earlier. So there's a 16 coach rake has to be put together. There's a significant number of moves. Now, 16 coaches is not 8 plus 8, 8 plus 5 plus 5. So there are 2 coaches, the seated and the club that come from Fort William, are actually removed from the rake, and they're sent to a place called the Klondike. Now, I don't know what or where the Klondike is, but apparently it's part of Edinburgh in Waverley Station. So they're taken off and they are set aside essentially. So that train is then put together as 16 coaches. Anybody who's bought a sleeper berth may not be aware of this. This whole thing happens in the middle of the night. The shunting happens. The coaches are fitted with Delmer couplers. So there's no reason why you should wake up and you will arrive fresh in the morning, most of you having had a shower. So it leaves at 1:40 and gets into London around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. So that's the southbound. The northbound comes into Edinburgh later in the evening. So it arrives 3:50, 4:20, 4:39. So the northbound arrives as 16 coaches, and it has to be broken into the 3 trains to do the Fort William, the Inverness, and the Aberdeen service. 8 coaches are taken off and they go to Inverness. 5 coaches are taken off and they go to Aberdeen. And then the 2 coaches which have spent the last couple of hours in the Klondike are brought in, joined together with the 3 sleepers, and they go to Fort William. So you can see that they'll leave at 4:21, 4:39, and 4:50. So there's a stream of trains which will leave Edinburgh 4:50 in the morning, and they go to all different corners of Scotland. But an incredibly complex shunting operation which takes place every night, and it's something that just happens, but it doesn't happen without a significant amount of input, a significant amount of effort. So the sleeper operation is an exceptionally complex operation going to all corners of the world. So TransPennine Express. So this is put together with a Class 68 loco and TransPennine brand this as number 3. What we can see here is the cab end of the BT, the driving trailer, slipping into vernacular usage here. So it consists of 5 coaches. So we have the DT coach at one end. It is a standard class coach. There's no toilet, there's no sink, so there's actually no water on that vehicle at all. Next to that is what we call the T2 coach, which is a standard class coach, but it also has the bicycle in it as well, and it has a standard toilet as well. So this is a unique in terms of this rate. There's only one of those in that particular arrangement. Then we have the T3 coach, and there are 2 of these T3 coaches. So there's 2 the same. It's basically the classic standard class. It's no standard class seats and a single toilet. There's 2 of those in the rake, and then making up the back and front of the rake is the T1 coach. It is the PRM coach. So if anybody needs to use PRM compliant capability, they need to go into the T1 coach. And you can see in the drawing there, space for 2 wheelchairs. It's also the first class coach. So there are 2+1 seating, generous layout, and the whole train is set up like an intercity train on the basis of the tables at most of the seats. And then there's also a significant galley. It's not quite as big as the one in Cal Sleeper, but it's a significant galley arrangement there as well. So that's the what the TransPennine Mark V coach looks like. So very different in terms of what it's actually delivering to Cal Sleeper. Where does it go? So I've taken a cull of the TransPennine Express route network. So this is the middle. It is what it says on the tin. This is the TransPennine area. So effectively, the vehicles are currently being used from Liverpool to Scarborough. So right away from Liverpool through Manchester, Huddersfield, Leeds, York, out to Scarborough. So the whole gambit of the powerhouse that is Northern Rail. So what's the same and what's different? So, as I said earlier, they both use the 22.2 metre car body length. They both have a 1200mm floor height. And the window size is the same as well. So apart from the berth windows on the Sleeper, the rest of the windows are the same size. It has a TCMS system, which is the same. And the doors at the end are the same. The aircon uses the same equipment. Cal Sleeper has it set up slightly different, so the actual aircon pack is the same. The battery system is the same. The bogies are the same. The toilet systems are the same. The gangways are the same. And the seats, as I said earlier, the first class seats in the Mark V for PPE are the same as those supplied in the Caledonian Sleeper CP coach. So what's different? The car body width is different. So Cal Sleeper is 2.75 wide, whereas the Mark V is only 2.7 wide. We'll mention that later. Obviously, as we've described in the layout is completely different. And that's to be expected, and that's very much part of the basis of the platform, that they can be very different. A driving trailer obviously is included in the Mark V. It's a push-door arrangement where Cal Sleeper has to have a local lead. I said the window size is the same. The window specification is actually different. And the reason I know that is because we put the wrong window in. So we had a broken window on Mark V, and we thought, we'll just get one out of stores. And we fitted it, and then we thought, this isn't quite the same. It fitted in, but it wasn't quite the same colour. So the specification is different, even though the size is identical. So we learned that to our cost. It has subsequently been changed. The coupling arrangement is completely different on these vehicles. So the intercar couplers on the Mark V TransPennine, it's a fixed format train, so there are bar couplers between the vehicles. Whereas the Cal Sleeper is essentially standalone coaches that can be put in any configuration, so it has delmers on the end of it. It's designed to be a very flexible arrangement, whereas the Mark V is very much set up as a 5-car fixed format train. Again, the end couplers are also very different as well. So the Cal Sleeper follows that principle of having delmers on the end of it, and that the connection to the loco is also a delmer. Whereas on the Mark V, the DT and the T1 car have buffers and screw buckeye type couplers. So very different arrangement. Even although the Cal Sleeper is shuffled every night, what we find on the Mark V is that the locals do tend to spend a lot of time connected to their particular set of coaches, but they do have that very flexible buckeye arrangement. Passenger counting in Cal Sleeper is basically, you say the train crew welcome you on board, and they tick your name off on the sheet. So that's very much, passenger counting is a very manual process. On the Mark V, there are stereoscopic cameras which actually count people getting onto the vehicle. They also count them moving along the vehicle as well, so that you can, as well as knowing how many people are on, you actually know which coach they're in. So if people move from coach to coach, there's a way of monitoring that movement as well. So the automatic selective door operation is fitted to both, but it's slightly different. The Cal Sleeper route obviously has a huge amount of capability. We go from 16 coach platforms in Euston to 1 or 2 coach platforms in the Highlands. Passenger information system, similar concept, but actually very different in terms of what to deliver. I said there, passenger counting is different, very different on both the vehicles, and the seat rest system is very different as well. So some a little bit the same, some different. So we've ended up with 2 very different vehicles from the same concept. So some reflections. This is actually a sunny day in Tobermory, for those people who know that part of the island. For people who are visiting from down south, it is occasionally sunny in Scotland. I've got proof here. So what I'm about to say, these are my thoughts. These are not the CAF considered opinion, but just some of the thoughts I've come across in working, particularly on these last 2 contracts. So we have a huge number of stakeholders in the rail industry at the moment. If we look at Caledonian Sleeper, the interactions that we've had are obviously with the operator circle, and DB Rail Freight are the traction supplier. They're also our testing operators, as well as the traction supplier to the circle. We also have them as our testing operator. Maintainer is Alstom, and the work was all done in the Bobby depot. The owner of the vehicles are a Lombard, but grant funding was provided by Transport Scotland. So all of these parties have a significant role to play in the delivery of the contract, as well as CAF. And there's a huge number of other people who I haven't mentioned, so people like SNC Lavalin, Network Rail, the different certification bodies, ORR. Looking at TransPennine Express, it's a similar sort of model where we have TPE as the operator. The traction supplier was DRS, or I'm not quite sure if they're called NTS now. So Class 68 locals were required because of the very kind of close relationship between that particular local and their coaches. They were modified to pull those for the control systems to talk to each other. But we had Freightliner as our testing operator. So Freightliner provided the drivers, but DRS provided the locomotives. Again, the maintainer is Alstom. Slightly different in terms of location, in that we rented the depot in Manchester to be able to do the commissioning work out of that. The owner of the Mark V is Beacon, who are well known in the freight and locomotive world, but don't have a significant presence in the passenger world. I think they also own a quite significant number of the Voyager fleet, and then we're the manufacturer. I just wanted to compare and contrast that with another pair of contracts that we have had in the UK, which is the Northern EMUs and DMUs, where Northern are the operator, they were also the testing operator, they're also the maintainer. So you've got quite a significant group of activities there, all being done by the same group. Owners ever short for those two projects, and we're the manufacturer. So with less people involved, there's much less interfaces. And I think it was fair to say, from a management perspective, it was easier to manage those projects where there are less interfaces. I also want to talk about risk, and I'm probably going to have a bit of a go at people in the room here, so my apologies if I upset anybody, but it comes from the heart. So I'm a train builder, so I think new trains are good, and I think they should be seen as something positive. But there are people out there who understandably see them as a risk. So we have to deal with that. So classical risk management theory says basically the risk owner should be the person who is able to deal with that particular risk. I think it's difficult to refute that. The person who understands the risk is best able to manage it, has got the levers and the controls to be able to manage that risk. So that's what classical risk management theory says. Unfortunately, in our railway, that's not what we do. When we actually get to gauging, so as a train builder, one of our biggest risks is gauging. So Network Rail are one of the people who actually see either new trains or replacement trains as a risk. And they see that as the operator's responsibility to manage. And the operators then, where they can, particularly with new trains, they cascade that risk to the train manufacturer. So we have the responsibility for gauging on infrastructure which we neither own nor control. So we have to pay Network Rail to carry out both surveys and any modifications to Network Rail infrastructure to get trains accepted. So that puts a huge risk into the project, it puts a risk into the manufacturer, and we are not the best people who are able to manage that. So we've paid out an 8-figure sum in the last 4 years for gauging. And that doesn't include the work which we've had to do. So we've paid out millions and millions of pounds to Network Rail to both assess and modify the infrastructure. So how do we mitigate that risk? How do we actually deal with that? So we're a train builder. So gauging is about space. So the only thing we can do is to make trains smaller. So if there's an issue gauging, we'll make the train smaller so that we have less issues with gauging. I don't think that's right, but it is what's happening, and I think we could end up with downward spiral. But there is another way, and I think yet again Scotland is leading the way. In the high-level output statement that Transport Scotland put out 2 years ago now, there was very, very clear guidance to Network Rail. Say, new stock introductions should not be expected to pay the cost of restoring clearances and track position, but where that has moved to clear existing stock. So my hat's off to Bill and the guys in Transport Scotland for actually delivering that. Please, please, can you get the guys in England and Wales to do the same thing? Because the people who manage the infrastructure are the best placed people to manage the risk of that. So we've demonstrated that it can be done properly, and the lead that's been taken by Team Scotland, if we want to call it that, is absolutely the right thing. It's risk being managed by the right people, and so that we don't end up going to places where manufacturers or other parties do the wrong thing. So I promised you a tall tale. It's not really a tall tale, but it's a bit of a tale. And this was something I put together in talking about this a couple of weeks ago. So I think this story starts back in the 80s, or maybe it was the 1960s. I'm not entirely sure. It's a bit of both. So Euston Station was electrified and opened on the 3rd of January. By the way, it's my birthday, in 1966. And for those of you who are wondering, I was 5. Work it all out. So the longest platforms at Euston, platform 1 is 400 metres, and that's the key measure. And platform 15 is 460 metres. Platform 15 is fine, that's plenty long enough. So in the late 1980s, Mark V sleepers, and all the railway people in here know that Mark V's are 23 metres. Everybody knows that. So if you've got 16 coaches, 2 locos, and the reason you need 2 locos is there's 1 loco pulls the train in, and then you need to put another loco on the other end to pull it out again to go off to Wembley. If you do the sums, you end up at 410 metres. That's too long. So, but we all know it used to work, it was fine. In reality, the rakes in those days were not all Mark V's. They were made up of Mark V's and Mark II's. So the rakes are actually just long enough to get into the platform use. So everything was fine. But when we came along to do the Mark V's, we didn't want to build 2 different sizes of coaches. So we had to build coaches which were slightly shorter than 23 metres. So that's where you get the 22.2 metre car body length. What's that going to do with missing seats? Well, the Mark V coaches are a derivative of CAF Sleeper. CAF Sleeper came first, and the Mark V came after. So the car bodies are the same length as we mentioned earlier, both 22.2 metres. That's 800 millimetres shorter than what we would consider the GD standard of 22 metres. I think we'd all agree that in 800 millimetres you can put in a row of seats. That's 4 seats across the coach. Then this is where I'm way off piste here. Way, way, way off piste. I'm a train builder. I don't know anything about revenue and yield and how many this and all that stuff. But let me just flow for a moment. So the TPE fleet is relatively small. There's only 13 trains and the 5 cars in each. So some assumptions. Let's say we get 11 sets out of 13. I think that's quite good availability. So maybe get 12, but I think 11 is reasonable. And we're going to ask the trains to do 5 journeys a day. Now, Liverpool to Scarborough is 142 miles and 2 chains. 711 miles, that's probably a decent day's work for a train. It could probably do more. So we've got 4 seats per coach, 5 coaches, 20 seats missing per train. So we're going to work them quite hard. We're going to make them do. We'll give them a day off for Christmas. We might give them a few more days off, but we'll give them a day off for Christmas. Beacon reckon these trains are going to last 35 years, and we're very comfortable putting them in your life. This is where I had to really stretch. So I looked up how much does a ticket cost? How much does it cost to go from Liverpool to Scarborough? And this is a very variable figure depending on how busy it is, how far you book ahead, blah, blah, blah. So ticket pricing is nothing to do with me. But 36 quid was a number which seemed to be about right. And it felt about right for the amount of time that you're on the train. Now, I did the sums and I thought, no, I've got that wrong. No, I'm miles off here. I'm massively miles off. But no, I've checked it. It's £500 million. So I thought, I better check it again. So I did the spreadsheet, and yeah, it's £500 million. That's in today's money. So I'd like to thank you all for listening, watching, and happy to answer any questions.